Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So we were studying the Annamaya Kosha, the first layer of our wrong identification with the non-self. And as we told that this concept of Annamaya Kosha will be discussed till the 164th verse. And today we will start with the 160th verse, where we will find that the notion of the self evolves as one evolves spiritually. So the self, we have that notion that if you remember the story in the Upanishad, that Virochana, the lord of the Asuras, and Indra both went to Prajapati for being instructed in the knowledge of the self. And we find that when both were instructed about the knowledge of the self, what it was instruction? That what you see as your reflection is the self. And we find that the Virochana, the Asura, took the body to be the self. At first Indra also did the same mistake. But as Indra was of sattvic temperament, gradually through his contemplation, by his introspection, at last he realized what the self is. But the Asura, the Virochana, was satisfied with the idea that the body is the self. And that's the idea which we will find in the 160th verse, that how, as we evolve spiritually, the notion of the self also evolves. So what's the verse it's saying? Deha aham iti eva jarasya buddhi dehe cha jive cha vidusha tu aham dhi viveka vijnanavatah mahatmanah brahma aham iti eva mati sadatmanihi. So the jarasya buddhi, the dull-witted one, jara buddhi, the one whose buddhi is jara. Jara means it is dull. It doesn't have the capacity to reflect. So that type of dull-witted person, what he thinks? Deha aham iti eva. He thinks that he is the body. And the one who is a book-learned person, the Vidusha, the so-called academician, who study the scriptures, who study the philosophy to understand the real nature of the self, what's the idea for them? The book-learned man, the Vidusha, identifies himself with a mixture of body and soul. That's what the idea with most of us have. That yes, this is the body, behind which the soul is there, which is the driving force behind this mind and the body. That's what we have an idea. So here Shankaracharya is saying that this is the one who have not realized the self. Those who try to understand the self with the conceptual knowledge, with the help of philosophy, with the help of book learning. So for them, that's the idea. So dehecha, jivecha, as in the body, as well as the self. This mixture, this conglomeration is what which gives us a sense of aham, that I am this body-mind complex, this idea, this type of egoistic idea comes from the learning of the scriptures, conceptual knowledge of the scriptures. It is not based on realization. So the man identifies himself with a mixture of body and the soul. But the one who is a Mahatman, Mahatma means the one who has, through his spiritual practice, went to the realization, such a Mahatma, who is Viveka Vijnanavata, whose spiritual journey is based on the discriminative knowledge, Based on the discrimination, he has renounced the thing which is not the self and has resorted to the contemplation of the self, and that has taken him to the realization where he understands that there is no such duality of the body and the soul. Only one thing exists, and that's the non-dual consciousness, the Brahman, which is non-local. This localized consciousness is something because of delusion. Actually, it is something which is non-local, which is the Brahman. The word Brahman came from Bri Dhatu. The Aham, the idea that I am, is not limited by time, space, causation. That I am not something who is limited by time, that I was born at a certain point of time, I am going to die at a certain point of time, I am sitting here in a particular place. All these ideas which is related with that amness, that falls off. You go beyond time, space, causation. That realization takes you to that realization that amness is beyond time, space, causation, and that's why it is called Brahman. Bri Dhatu, from the word Brahman came. That it is something brihat. It is not something localized. It is beyond all the concepts, limited concepts of time, space, causation. It transcends that. So the one who has realized through his spiritual endeavor the self, what he knows, Brahma aham iti eva mati sadatmani, that I am Brahman and Brahman alone. The dichotomy of body and mind, that has fallen off. He has transcended that. He knows he is the self and self alone. So what it is saying that aham, deha aham iti eva jarasya buddhi. It's like the Charvakas, the rank materialists. As in India, they were there. That what they told, even in the present day, we find the same idea is prevalent. What's the idea? That somehow, because of this mixture of the matter, consciousness has evolved. Consciousness is an epiphenomenon. It actually doesn't exist. In the olden days, the Charvakas used to give a very nice example. What's the example? That if you mix lime with, the lime is something white, while making a betel, you know that in India they have the habit of having betel leaf. So they mix the lime with some other spice, but both are not red. When they mix together, that the color becomes red. So consciousness is something like that. It has evolved by the conglomeration of matter. But what we are is actually this body. With the death of the body, our existence is no more there. So if that's true, that's why it's called Charvaka philosophy. Charvaka means Charu Vaka. If that's true, that philosophy was really a rank materialistic philosophy. That if everything ends with the end of the body, then there is no question of virtue and vice. That I lead a virtuous life with the idea in all the religion that I go to heaven after death if I lead a life based on the do's and don'ts, based on the commandments. So if there is no afterlife, there is no question of virtue and vice. So live the life in such a way that you can get the maximum pleasure out of it. So for that, even if you have to take loan, well and good, you take loan. So that's what's the idea about the Charvakas, that Rinang kritva ghritang pivet. That take loan but enjoy. Ghritang means have the most delicacies. That in the even in the Indian tradition, you will find the delicacies have something to do with ghee. We will cook the food with ghee. That's the delicacy. So Rinang kritva, take loan and have ghee. So now who will give you loan? It's not easy to get loan. So you will find it's a wonderful philosophy which do tally with the present day. So what's the meaning of Charvaka? Charva means Charu Vaka. So you have to be very much honey mouth. You have to learn to speak so nicely. You have to write such a nice application that you get loan. Easily you get loan, and with that you live a life. So that was a very rank materialistic philosophy. So such philosophy you'll find that reflection is still, even in the present day, it's there. So that's the idea behind that idea, Deha aham iti eva jarasya buddhi. That those who are very extremely dull-witted, they take this physical body as their existence alone, nothing beyond that. And now those who are really have started the search. But the search is only in the intellectual level. What they think? Dehe cha jive cha vidusha tu aham dhi. So one whose sense of aham, that I, that is aham dhi, the sense of aham, is both the deha as well as the jiva, the mind. Jiva is that which transmigrate. After death, the body falls off, the mind transmigrates. So it is the deha cha jiva, the consciousness associated with the mind and with the body. So this two, the conglomeration of this two is the aham. So it is the deha which undertakes all worldly duties and the jiva that transmigrates. So when I am living with the body, I do all my duties, and the thing which transmigrates is the jiva, the mind, the shukshma sharira. So this two, so we will find this idea of consciousness as well as this body, both existing together, is to somehow, is to a certain extent, is we find is in the Samkhya and in the Yoga philosophy. They say this Prakriti and Purusha. These two are conglomerating to create this world of phenomenal existence. So that's the idea which we find is the learned. We'll find it's a wonderful thing which Shankaracharya is saying. The entire Western philosophy, this dichotomy, we will find is there in the entire Western philosophy. What's the ideas in the Western philosophy, if we summarize? That they have the idea of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That someone will be propounding something, some other group will be negating that, will be opposing that, and then someone will be synthesizing that. So you will find in the history of Western philosophy, this thesis, antithesis, and synthesis happened through three types of ideas about our existence. They are called idealism, realism, and the Descartes, who's considered as the father of the Western philosophy, Descartes. His the philosophy, dualistic philosophy. What's the idea? Very interesting. That idealism. What's the idealism? Subjective idealism. It says that the external world doesn't exist. It is just the construct of the mind. As we sometimes, so many times we say that even in the modern day, in the neurology, they will say that whatever I am seeing is not actually as it is outside there. It is a projection of the mind. That the red flower, the redness is not there. My mind, no color enters there, no light enters there. How can it see? The mind with which I am perceiving the world, how can it really see the external world? No light enters there. Nothing of this perception enters there. So that common example which we give, the light falls on your retina, and there the function of the light is over. It gets converted into some nerve current. That this light stimulates the nerves, and in the form of a nerve current, which is not light. It's like an electricity. It goes to your brain, which is the organ through which the mind works, and the so-called color perception center is not perceiving. That frequency of your nerve wave is projected when it stimulates that brain center. Then the color is projected from the brain, and I see the flower outside as red. It is projected outside. So you'll find that idealism, just to give an idea, let's say that knowledge and experience are inherently tied to the mind. What I'm seeing is just what the mind is making me see. The physical world has no independent existence apart from our perception of it. So that's idealism. Now, then came the realism. The realism, what they're saying? That no, the reality do exist independent of our perceptions. It's a very subtle distinction. You now see that even in idealism, easily you can say that outside the what is there, I may not know its real nature, but something is there, which is being projected as what I am seeing. Something is there. So some objective reality is there. So that what I am seeing is, its reality doesn't depend only on our perceptions. That something objective reality is also there. So it's actually a very vast philosophy. We are just trying to give them and just an overall summary, just overall an overview of this idea of idealism and realism. And then comes this Descartes' dualism, that he is saying the same thing as Shankaracharya is saying, that reality is composed of two fundamentally different substances, mind and matter, which are interacting with each other. The mind is something non-physical and the body is something physical. This is interacting. Mind is beyond time and space. The body is within this time and space. These two are interacting to make all our perceptions possible. This whatever I am seeing is the interaction of mind and the matter. That's what the so-called intellectual says. In the Descartes, this dualism, we find the same idea what Shankaracharya is saying. Shankaracharya has said it long back. That's what the intellectuals are saying. But there is a very great problem. Even in the time of Descartes, a princess, the princess of Bohemia, his name was Elizabeth, he challenged Descartes. He told, just show me that you say that mind works on matter. Show me where mind is working on matter. Show me. It's a big challenge. It is that challenge of Elizabeth, the king princess of Bohemia, that challenge you will find is finding expression even in AI, artificial intelligence at the present day. They're saying, but show where it is all matter. That's what princes want to say. That if you say that mind is acting on matter, even through all your experiment, what will you find? That yes, I want to move something. I need my body. So I say that that's mind has actually instructed. But where do you find the mind? That behind my instruction, I will find that the nerve currents are there. That from the brain, some instruction is coming through the nerves. It is an impulse. That nerves are like electricity. And that when goes to the particular muscle, it contracts. And even in the brain, you will find a particular functioning, particular way of, they say that there is all the neurons, there are synapses, that there is this, the synaptic, what you say, this all these connections, that actually is producing the nerve current. So even in modern science, they are trying to say everything is matter and matter alone. And see, as a replica, I am producing an artificial intelligence. It is exactly like that we are doing. And there is no question of some consciousness acting on matter. That's what the princess actually challenged. Let's just show where the consciousness is acting on matter. These are two totally different type of things. How can there be an interaction? So here comes the Advaita Vedanta. They say this wonderful idea that actually this consciousness and consciousness alone, which is appearing as matter, these two we can never see together. Very interesting. Just when that common example in Vedanta which we give again and again, that when a rope is appearing as a snake, do you see the snake and the rope together? When I say that the consciousness is acting on the body, it's a totally wrong notion. I can never prove it. Why? Because when I am in delusion, when I am already deluded, can I see the rope? I see only the snake. Only when the delusion falls up, again I see the rope. When I see the rope, the snake is no more there. So the question of consciousness and matter, just perceiving them together, knowing them together can never be. When I am seeing matter, it is only pure matter. What appears as consciousness is just the way the Buddhists say that what you say consciousness is not consciousness at all. They give a very nice example that when you move a torch very fast, it appears as a circle. So your idea of consciousness is something like that. That you are there's all the matter is moving. Behind that, something like that alat, like that a fire ring is appearing, which is something like that consciousness. It is just an appearance. Consciousness is an appearance. So it's true as long, it's in that Vedanta says it's true. That as long as I am under the delusion, it's all matter. There is no question of consciousness. When I go beyond the delusion, then there is no matter at all. It is only consciousness. Consciousness and consciousness alone, which is appearing as matter. So what's the idea? That now all this book learning, whether it is idealism, realism, or Descartes' dualism, whatever it is, it's all trying to find the ultimate reality through your intellect, through your mind. And Vedanta is saying, unless you go beyond the mind, you can never know the reality. You can never know the reality. So with the mind, I am trying to find out the reality. There is a nice way of saying it. I forgot who gave that example. It's a wonderful example. That our attempt to find the ultimate reality is something like this. That I decide to find out the smallest creature in the ocean, and for that I go in a ship into the deep waters of the ocean and throw a net in the water, so that all the creatures I can pull up with the net to find out which is the smallest creature. Now the holes of the net are 2 millimeter, means it is 2 millimeter length, 2 millimeter breadth. So it is 4 millimeter square. The holes are. So now when you pull up the net, what will you get? You will of course get the tiniest creature, which will be more than 4 millimeter square area. Because anything which is tiniest, smaller than that, will be passing through the hole. It cannot be filtered. It cannot be just, you cannot pick it up with the net. It will pass through the hole. So our mind and the senses are doing the same thing. The reality can never be found with the mind and the senses. When the mind and the senses is coming into picture, it is projecting. It is what is projecting the reality into something else. As we give the example that mind is like the prism. When white light falls on it, it brings it to the spectrum of 7 colors. To know the reality, I have to get rid of the prism, and then all the 7 colors will merge in the white light. So that's the idea which we find Shankaracharya is giving here. That it's not the question of interaction of the mind and the sense. At present, the idea of consciousness which we have is also an illusion. The only way to find out that it is consciousness alone which is appearing as this universe is spiritual practice. By going beyond the mind. And that's what Shankaracharya is saying, that here, Viveka Vijnana, through that constant discrimination, when you are trying to get rid of your association with what is anatma, and then you are contemplating on the same, then only you go to the realization that Brahma iti, aham iti eva mati sada atmani. And once you get that realization, it is not going to be something away from you. It is not going to be beyond your memory ever. That it is something, not an acquired knowledge. You can lose something which is something separate from you. You cannot lose anything which is yourself. As they say very nicely, that Sri Ramakrishna's that story is there, that a man went to another person's house at night in search of fire because he was having the habit of smoking. And when he knocked the door, the person opened the door and he told that I want fire. And the person told him, oh, such a wonderful person you are. You are carrying the lantern with you and you came here to my house in search of fire. So the fire is with you. So that's the thing that Vedanta says. It is not the question of getting something. It is not prapti. It is apti. It is already with you. Somehow I am deluded. I have forgotten the real nature. It is so that in Vedanta they give an example of the necklace. The lady of the house is busy with her work, and somehow the necklace got entangled with his clothes and it is not visible. The sari she is wearing, or the apron she is wearing, within that it got somehow entangled and it is not visible. And she is searching hither and thither her necklace. Will she ever get the necklace? Always with her. Someone points, wow, it is there around your neck. And then she realizes, she somehow was deluded that it is not with her. Once she finds it, then she finds, it is something which I need not have to attain. It is always with me. Somehow I have forgotten about it. So that's why they say that once you get identified with your real nature and you know that you are Brahman, you become always, you always have that idea. You become Sada Atmani. That idea that you are the self never goes away from you. It becomes something which is permanent because the delusion has fallen off. So that's the idea. So once you know that when you are in Samadhi, you know that you are the self, that time the entire existence obliterates, falls off. Even your body-mind complex falls off. You are just aware of your amness, which is beyond time, space, causation. When you come down from that state, again you see this world, but now you are convinced that's the thing, because of delusion, is appearing as this. There is no duality. It is consciousness which is appearing as this world of phenomenal existence. So for that, the spiritual endeavor is required. It's not just mere intellectual reasoning through which we can ever go to that realization. So now you will understand that what Shankaracharya is saying is something wonderful. That of course those who are gross, those are totally involved with this physical existence, they say this body alone is the self. Nothing is beyond this. We have only one life. That's the common thing which we hear nowadays. That enjoy it because we have only one life. That is the idea of the Deha Ahamiti Eva Jarasya Buddhi. Those who say that this is the only life. Dehe cha jive cha vidusha tu ahamdhi. Those who have started inquiring, for them this is the idea. In all the dualistic philosophy, in all the dualistic religion, this idea. I am, God is. I am, the self is. But it again speaks of a concept. It has not taken you to the realization. It is only the mystics of all the realization. Those who have gone to that realization, in all the religion you will find. Even in Christianity, the Christian mystics, they speak of that unitary experience. Even in Islam, we will find the mystics, the Sufis, they speak of that unitary experience. And the same thing in Vedanta. The proof of Vedanta is not that what we have propounded through our Vedantic philosophy, following that path alone you go to a realization, then someone would have criticized. Oh, this is a way to modify your mind, hallucinate in a particular way. The Vedanta's way of sadhana was alone which was taking you to that realization. But we find in all the religions, the mystics, those who really practice the religion to go to a state of realization, there we find all are speaking that same language. That famous language of Meister Eckhart, that infinity lies in each and every moment. It speaks of Vedanta. When the Sufis in Islam, the ultimate truth is called Al-Haq. The truth. Al-Haq means the truth. And the Sufis were persecuted because the so-called the upholders of the religion thought that what they were saying is blasphemous. What they were saying? They were saying, Anal Haq, I am the truth. It's blasphemy. How can you be the truth? The dichotomy, you're going beyond the dichotomy. And they were persecuted. You'll find throughout the history of religion, the mystics that are in all religion, they go to that realization, that Aham, that I am, that Brahman. And that's where the dichotomy has fallen off. From there, when you come down, then you again see this world. But now this world has transformed. You know, because of the delusion. The moment I come again in this body, mind, senses, this same consciousness, when I really realize that consciousness, that I am that, this entire world has obliterated. This phenomenal existence has obliterated. That amness alone was there. From that again there is a vyuthana. I come back. Then I see this world of phenomenal existence. And then that conviction comes. This is appearing as that. So that's what's the idea which Shankaracharya is saying. So as we evolve spiritually, the more the idea of the self also evolves. So the self alone exists. This is the highest realization which happens only through our spiritual practices. Otherwise, through intellectuality, through our mind, we at the most can go to that idea of that dualistic idea, where we don't say that the body alone is the self. We do accept there is a consciousness, but somehow we have get the feeling there is a consciousness acting in the body which makes our life possible. So after saying that, now Shankaracharya is what he is saying, the notion of the self evolves as one evolves spiritually until we realize ourselves to be one with all. So that's the idea. So when you go to that realization, what happens? As we were saying, you find that the entire world has obliterated. There's only consciousness, the self alone exists. From that, when you come back, again you see the world. So now what's the conviction? Is what I see is a projection of the self. The self, through the mind and senses, is appearing as his entire existence. It is the same self within me is actually pervading the entire universe. The same self is Sarvatma, is the self of all. So that's the realization happens when you go beyond the body, mind, senses, go to the realization, and from Vyuthana, when you come back, then this realization comes. And that's the idea which has been spoken of in the 161st verse. What is say? Shankaracharya, Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya is saying, Atra Atma Buddhing Tyaja Mura Buddhe Tvak Mangsa Meda Asti Purisha Rashau Sarvatmani Brahmani Nirvikalpe Kurushva Santing Paramang Bhajasva. So, that a foolish person, Mura Buddhe, cease to identify thyself, O foolish person. He is actually addressing the foolish person, that the one who thinks himself as this body-mind complex. To him, Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya is addressing. What is saying? O foolish person, O Mura Buddhe, stop this identification of yourself with this bundle of Tvak Mangsa Meda Asti Purisha Rashav. This body is nothing but a conglomeration. It's a bundle of Tvak, the skin, Mangsa, the flesh, Meda, the fat, the adipose layer, Asti, the bone, and Purisha, all the filthy materials, excreta. So this is what is the body with which you are so much attached. So disidentify yourself from this conglomeration. Sarvat, why he is speaking of this conglomeration? Again, every time we have to remember that sometimes some sentence when you're reading literally, there is some philosophy behind it, apart from that literal meaning. That literal meaning is, okay, this conglomeration of all these filthy things is the body, and you have to disidentify yourself from that. Now, immediately, the so-called, the materialist will say that yes, that conglomeration itself is, however filthy it may be, that's my identity. Why should I just disidentify myself from that? But the question here is why, instead of just saying Deha, Shankaracharya is saying it is a conglomeration of all those things. Tvak, Mangsa, Meda, Asti, Purisha, Rashav. The idea is, the Shankaracharya is trying to say, show me, that the so-called materialistic, show me in this world that wherever there is a conglomeration, that all the constituents that conglomerate together to form a conglomerate, does that conglomerate serve the purpose of any of its constituent? Ever has you seen in this world? What's the idea? Just now I'm sitting in this room. This room is made up of bricks, stones, cement, the wood, and even it's connected with electricity. There are so many furnitures. All these are the constituents of this room. Does this room serve any purpose for the brick, for the chairs, for the electricity, for the cement? Does it serve any purpose? No. The one who is not a constituent, like me, I am not a constituent of this room. This room is not made of me. I am not a part of it. I come from outside. And for me, this room has been made. So it is in Sankhya philosophy, they call Sanghato Pararthatva. That whenever you see a conglomerate in this world, wherever, that conglomerate must be serving the purpose of someone who is apart from all those conglomerates. The conglomeration with all the conglomerates is always serving the purpose for someone who is apart from that conglomerate. So whenever you find Shankaracharya is speaking of Deha, and while speaking of Deha, he is speaking of all its parts. It is not just to say it is filthy. It is also to say that it is a conglomerate, so it can never be your identity. Your identity must be something separate from it. for which it is serving the purpose. The purpose of is bhoga apavarga. At present, bhoga means all the experiences I am going through. These experiences at last will bring renunciation in me. I will learn through them, and at last it will result in apavarga, liberation. So bhoga apavarga. It is just like a book through which I am going to learn. It is not the real me. So this is the idea. So disidentify yourself from this conglomerate. That's the main idea. And then when you realize yourself, then you will understand that the self of yours is the self of all. Sarvatmani Brahmani Nirvikalpe. That's the word came here. So when you go to that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when you go beyond all Vikalpa, what I am seeing is all Vikalpa. Beyond all Vikalpa when I go. What Vikalpa means? Vikalpa means substitute. That there is something which I am seeing as something else. Like map is a Vikalpa. Just to give a common example, the world which we see, what it is like, it is just a map. Why it's a map? Suppose I go out to find out the network of roads of Melbourne. After traveling, if I have an idea, I come back and try to draw. What I do, I draw a map. And in the map, for my convenience, what I do, that the freeway, most probably I will draw with red color. To distinguish it from all the roads which are merging with the freeway, I draw it with, the freeway is the red color, and all the roads which are merging are the green color, and all the exits. You will find in the freeway there are exits, there is something merging. The exits I draw with another color, it's a green, or blue. So this all the freeway is red color, the merging roads are green, and the exits are blue. A child sees the map, and asks him, what is this? You say, these are the roads. And now when he goes out and he finds no red, no green, no blue color roads, he asks you, where are the red, green, blue color roads? They are not there. For my convenience, that's why Shankaracharya very nicely has told, this world is vyavaharika satya. As long as I'm in delusion, for my day-to-day activity, it has some reality for the time being. It is just like a map. But atyantika, that is no absolute reality. It is for my convenience, my mind is putting all those colors. So it is the map of reality, it is not the reality. So when you go to the Nirvikalpa, then what? All these substitutes, these maps fall off. That's what's the meaning of Vikalpa. It is beyond all these substitutes, beyond all the things by which I am trying to relate to the reality. These are the Vikalpas. So my mind has gone to that Nirvikalpa. It has all these Vikalpas has fallen off. I just see the reality as it is. I am just realizing the consciousness which is the only thing which exists in the entire universe, nothing else. So that's when you go to that Nirvikalpa. So for such a person, when he is coming back from that state, he sees Sarvatmani Brahmani. The same Brahman, which is the essence of me, is the Atman, is the essence of each and every being. Knowing that, only he attains peace, nothing else. Kurushva Santing Paramang Bhajasva. So that, and thus he attains that supreme peace. Why that supreme peace? That all our struggle, all our suffering comes from duality. If I alone exist, there is no question of fear. The question of fear comes only when there is a duality. Someone apart from me is there, then the question of harming comes. The question of inflicting pain on me comes. If I alone exist, nothing else exists apart from me, there is no question of shoka or moha, delusion. As Vedanta says, that tatra ko shoka ko ka moha ekatvam anupashyata. The one who has seen that oneness, he goes beyond all shoka, all moha. Because nothing, as in Bhagavatam, very poetically it has been, with an example it has been explained. What's that example? That we always feel that I am suffering when I am harmed by other. But if I know I am the one person who exists, do you really feel any suffering? Though the suffering may be there, you won't be inimical towards other. The question of enemy that falls off. How? Very nice example they are giving. that whom do you blame? While taking food, sometimes accidentally our tongue gets bitten by our teeth. Whom do you blame for that? You know it's the same. It is you only who have bitten your tongue. So when you know you alone exist, the question of enemy, and this animosity, the question of struggle, all this falls off. With whom you will fight, with whom you will struggle. All these ideas of fight, quarrel, tension falls off. And then only you can attain that supreme peace. When you have attained that you know that nothing apart from you exists. And you come to this dual existence, all these things are mere a projection. It's something superimposition. Something is appearing as something else. It's just an appearance. It's not the reality. Behind all this is the calm soul. It is just all our spiritual journey is like going to the deep waters of the ocean. In India, we find the poor fishermen with a small boat. They try to go to the deep waters of the ocean for fishing. It's a very difficult job with a small boat because there's the huge waves. But this fisherman knows these waves are just in the shore. If somehow they can break this wave barrier and can go to the deep waters, that is all calm. All these waves are just in the shore. So it's a sight to see. In the morning, this fishermen, they will try to go into the deep waters. A wave comes, throws them to the shore. Again they try. So then 2-3 attempts, at last they somehow can navigate through those waves and reach the deep ocean where there are no more waves at all. In that calm ocean, now they are enjoying their fishing, whatever it may be. So what's the idea? That all these waves of the mind, to go beyond them is our spiritual endeavor. It's not easy. We will be thrown again and again. But like those fishermen, we have to try. Break those wave barriers. And once you can break, it's all prashanti, the calmness of the soul. The same mind will now, once the waves are gone, is the same. That same mind will now appear as a consciousness and consciousness alone. Is the conscious. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says, Shuddha Buddhi, Shuddha Atma Ak. When the consciousness somehow is as if appearing in the form of waves, that's the mind. That's why even the Yoga Sutra starts with that sutra, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, to stop these waves, to go beyond these waves. And then you attain that prashanti. You know you are that self and self alone. All these waves causes the delusion in the form of the projection of what I see in this world of name and form. Stop those waves, you are one with that consciousnness alone. That's like the deep waters of the ocean. So you have gone beyond those wave barriers. And that's the idea which is spoken of by Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya in this verse. That once you go to that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, in Nirvikalpa, then this Brahman, Atman becomes the Brahman. The idea that I am this local consciousness that falls off, that merges in the Brahman. And when you are coming out from that, you see that Brahman is being projected and in the entire universe, that alone is there. And then the question of fight, tensions all fall off when you alone exist. And that takes you to that prashanti, that supreme peace, which in no way can be comparable with any of the happiness or peace which we find in this world of duality. So that's why it is called Paramang Shanti. It is a supreme peace that you can realize only when you go to that state. So however, to attain such peace, one has to experience the Atman. So now, we will feel that's why we are again and again saying it's not a matter of intellectual gymnastic. It's a matter of spiritual endeavor. One has to attain, has to experience the Atman. Mere scholarship is of no avail in this regard. So this is stated in the next verse. So what is this? In the next verse it is saying in the 162nd verse, Dehendriyadav asati brahma uditang vidwang ahangtang na jahati yavat tavat na tasya asti vimukti varta api astu esha vadanta nayanta darshihi. So what it is saying? So as long as the book learned man, so this Vidwan, so-called the Vidwan is the book learned person. So he does not give up his mistaken identification with the body. Ahanta na jahati yavat, as long as he doesn't give his identification, ahanta. Or with what? With dehendriyado, with all this deha and indriya. He has an identification. As long as he cannot give that. And from where that this identification came? From Brahma, from the delusion it has arisen, this identification. Unless he can go beyond that. Yavat means as long as he cannot do it. Tavat, till then. Na tasya asti vimukti varta. He can never get the idea, varta, of the liberation, final liberation. So there is no talk of emancipation for him. This vimukti varta. He can in no way get the news of emancipation. There is no idea that what emancipation is. He has no idea of it. That's why in our Upanishads they say that the one who has gone to the realization, he is the one who has gone to the realization. It is called his na ativadi. That at present we speak a lot, but all what I speak about the self is something beyond our realization. Ativada means, ati means beyond, vada means our speech. So we all are speaking something beyond our realization. Just that example which we give sometimes again and again, that suppose I have tasted mango and go and describe the taste of mango to a group of people who have never tasted mango. Can I ever explain them the taste of mango? They may think we have understood. Because when I say it's sweet, they try to relate the sweetness with all the sweet things they have tasted. When I say it has a nice flavor, they try to relate the word flavor with all the things that has flavor which they know. So they are trying to relate my words with their available fund of experience. Unless they really taste the mango, do all those knowledge in any way resemble with the knowledge of the real mango? No, can never be. So similar is our idea of the self. It's all ativada. We haven't realized. After hearing from the scriptures, we are trying to understand it intellectually. But you have to go beyond your intellect to realize that. So all these are ativada. We are speaking something which is beyond our experience. So that's why he's saying there is no vimukti varta. You can never go to that liberation because you have never realized the self is. So that's why you have to go beyond this identification. And then api astu, and otherwise all these Vedanta Nayanta, those who are constantly speaking of Vedanta. Nayanta means of Nyaya philosophy. Means these are the various philosophy. To understand Vedanta, you need logic. And that Nyaya gives that logic. So you have studied the Nyaya. With the help of Nyaya, now you understand the Vedanta and you think I have understood everything. So here Shankaracharya is saying Vedanta Nayanta Darshi. Apitu, that you may know Vedanta, you may know Nyaya. But at last, unless you have realized, they are of no use. They just at last end up in ativada. Whatever you're speaking is something beyond your realization. That actually remembers us the story of that Sri Ramakrishna's Pandit, a scholar who was traveling by a boat and he was about to cross a river. And the boatman was illiterate. And this scholar was again and again asking the boatman, have you read Samkhya philosophy? He said, no. The Pandit said, your life is of no use. You haven't read Samkhya philosophy. Have you read Yoga? No. Vedanta, Nyaya? No. So your life is almost 80% waste because you don't know this philosophy. Just you are living a life of ignorance. And then suddenly there was a storm. And the boat was about to capsize. And the boatman knew that in no time the boat will be capsizing. So he shouted at the Pandit, Sir, do you know swimming? He said, no, I don't know swimming. The boatman said, your entire life is waste. So you don't know swimming. So that's what Shankaracharya is indicating. That's to swim, to desire this, to constantly disassociate yourself from what is not the self and to contemplate on the self so that it takes us to the realization. So this is the swimming. Unless you know that, everything is just mere West. Why it is West? Because we will find by studying Vedanta, we do get a type of bliss. It's constantly doing that vichara. I am the self, I am not the body, not the mind. I am something beyond the body-mind complex, I am the self. It gives a very, very elevated feeling. But we will find an interesting thing, that it is something like a laboratory condition, that when I am away from the world, I am just in my a secluded room meditating with that idea, I get that bliss, and I think it's something, a big attainment, but I forget. The same me, if I have to interact with the world, I cannot maintain that peace. I constantly get agitated. What it speaks of, that this idea which I was contemplating, though it gave me bliss in an ideal condition, but I cannot keep that bliss, that peace when I'm interacting with the world. This speaks of lack of realization. Once if I've really realized that I am the conscious principle, I am not the body-mind complex, anything of the external world is not going to affect me. It will be just like a procession which I am seeing from the balcony of my house. All those noise and everything, it has nothing to do with me. I am just the spectator. So all this world with all its noise, with all its tensions, will be nothing to me. I will just be the one who is observing it. But as it is not a realization, we find we do get identified with it. And that's what Swamiji says, that unless we have gone to the realization, our condition is like the stag. Stag is a male deer. A male deer one day was bragging. He saw his reflection in the water. And he saw his muscular limbs. He was quite strong. So that the fawn, the small fawn, the baby deer, to him he was bragging, see how strong I am, how muscular are my limbs. And then suddenly the stag heard the barking of a dog. He couldn't see the dog, just heard the barking from somewhere. And it was so frightened, it started running, frantically running. After a long distance it stopped. It thought now it is safe. But it was totally exhausted. It was gasping for breath. Now the fawn also followed him. Now he was surprised. He asked, just now you were so confident about your strength. What happened to your confidence? And the stag replied, I don't know where my confidence goes when I hear the barking of a dog. So that's our condition, the so-called intellectuals. That all our knowledge of the self, everything, is of no avail when we are facing the challenges of life. We become disturbed, that Prashanti has gone off, because we have not, through the process of discrimination, went to the realization. It's just an intellectual knowledge. So that's what Shankaracharya at last is giving pinpointing the importance of sadhana, of the practice. It is not mere academic knowledge. Through practice, we have to go to that realization. Otherwise, all this philosophy of Vedanta Nyaya is of no avail. And then we have to stop identifying ourselves with the body. That's what the next verse states. How is giving some example. Chhaya sharire pratibimba gatre yat swapna dehe hridi kalpitange yatha atma buddhi tava na asti kachit jiva sharire cha tatha eva ma astu. What is very interesting. The chhaya sharire. Do you ever get identified with your shadow? No. Do you ever get identified with the reflection you see in the mirror? No. Pratibimba gatre. Yat swapna dehe. When I was dreaming, in the dream you saw yourself. You saw yourself. When you wake up, do you identify yourself with that, with the one whom you thought as yourself in the dream? No. You know, it was just a dream body. So you never identify with the dream body of yourself. Nor when you are just fantasizing something, where you are being impersonating yourself as your fantasy. Do you ever feel that the person whom I am identifying myself in my fantasy is the real me? No. So similarly, how that's what we have to do. Tatha atma buddhi tavana asti kachit. So when is that what we have to do? So it in our mind, so to do not identify with this living body. Consider them to be just like the chaya sharira, just like the shadow. So that's the idea. That consider this living body also like the shadow, like the reflection, like the body you see in the dream, like the body you fantasize. See it like that. Don't take it to be real. So that's the example which they are giving. As you know that it is not something which is your real identity, you have to go beyond that. So always see it something just like your shadow, or like your reflection, or like your dream body, or like the body you have fantasized in your fantasy. So that's how try to objectify. Don't get identified with it. And after saying that, as a conclusion of his discussion on the Annamaya Sharira, what he's saying, that we have to stop identifying ourselves with this body, because this identification is the root of all our miseries. So that is the root of all miseries. That's why we have to do that. Whenever we say identify yourself with the body and be absorbed in yourself, so now immediately we will ask, what's the use of it, utility of it? In this world, even a fool doesn't do anything unless he knows the utility. So here he is speaking of that utility, that you go beyond all the miseries and away with it alone, in the way you attain the supreme peace and ultimately liberation. So you go beyond all miseries, you attain supreme peace, and you attain liberation. These are the purpose, this is the utility. So this is stressed in 164th verse, with which for the time being the discussion on the Annamaya Kosha will be over. And then he will go to the Pranamaya Kosha, the sheath of vitality. So what's the last verse in this in his discussion for the Annamaya Kosha? Dehatmadhi eva nrinang asat dhiyang janmadi dukkha prabhavasya bijam yatah tatah tvang jahi tang prayatnat tyakte tu chitte na puna bhava asha. So this for men whose intellect rests on the asat. This is what's the idea? This nrinang asat dhiyang. So those whose identification is with this body and whose notion that the body is the Atman itself. So there's a word, these words are very wonderful. Dehatmadhi. The dhi means intellect. What is intellect? As per the intellect, he thinks Deha Atma, this body is the Atma. The one who thinks by his intellect that his body is the Atma, and who is constantly taking the asat, taking the thing which is not real, not the self, as the self. That is asat dhya. So for such a person, the cause of suffering is, this causes, this identification is the cause of all the suffering. This forms the cause of rise of sorrows beginning with birth. The moment we are born, our suffering starts. Constant suffering because of this identification. Janmadi dukkha prabhavasya vijam. Because of the desires we are born in this physical body, and this constant suffering goes on. Why suffering? Because we are trying to cling to something which is a flow. I can never cling to something. I can never grasp something which is flowing. And that results in dukkha. This constant, the body is constant in the change of, is a process of degeneration. Drishta janma svabhava, just as we are discussing. When I am seeing, it is decaying. Drishta nashta svabhava. When I am seeing, then it's decaying. Such a thing can never give us pleasure. Because however I may try to identify myself with the body, it is decaying, it is going towards death. And that entails in all the suffering. So you will find that we are all optimistic as a youth, and as we grow old, we start becoming pessimistic. This duality is always there. Why? Because we find that this body, this mind with which I thought to be the be-all and end-all of my existence is all dwindling, is all vanishing. I cannot hold on to it. That leads to suffering. So those who have this Dehatma Buddhi are bound to suffer. From the birth itself, that dukkha starts. Janmadi dukkha prabhavasya vijam. So that's why yatah tatah tvang jahitang prayatnat. So that's why it is not easy, but there's the only way of going beyond all the suffering. As in the scriptures they say, Nanya pantha vidyate ayanaya. There is no other way. This is the only way. You have to go through your spiritual practice beyond that. So that's yatah tatah tvang jahi. You have to conquer over it. Tang prayatnat. Tyakte tu chitte na puna bhava asha. So unless you can disidentify yourself with this body-mind complex, there is no asha, there is no hope for liberation. Tyakta tu chitte na puna asha. So that's once the mind is detached, there is no possibility of being born again. So that's the idea, tyakte tu chitte na puna bhava asha. So you have to detach the mind from the body. Once it is done, there is no chance of being born again. What's the idea? That as long as I am living, I have to detach myself from this body-mind complex by constant endeavor, by constantly discriminating that it is not me. It is just like switching off the fan. When you switch off the fan, does the fan stop revolving immediately? No. Because of its past momentum, it goes on revolving for some time to stop at last. Similarly, if we constantly disidentify ourselves from the body-mind complex, we are as if switching off the connection with the body-mind complex, our identification with the body-mind complex. We are switching off. Does the body falls off immediately? No. Because of the prarabdha, because of its past karma, that it has already gathered some momentum. It will continue till that momentum is over, the prarabdha is over. But once that is over, there won't be any more rebirth. The transmigration will stop because the momentum has all been exhausted. That will take you to that atyantika mukti, the liberation, the final liberation from where there is no coming back. You are liberated. So that's the idea. Tyakta tu chitte na puna bhava asha. Once you disidentify yourself from your identification with the non-self in the form of body, in the form of this Annamaya kosha, know it for certain, there is no coming back. So that leads you to that final liberation. So this is the idea which Shankaracharya is speaking of through these verses. Again and again he's stressing that don't get identified with the non-self. Be always aware of your spiritual nature. Always assert your spiritual nature. Be identified with that till it takes you to the realization. And then once that has happened, your connection with the non-self will fall off, which ultimately will take you to that liberation once the prarabdha is exhausted. So with this, we stop our discussion today. In the next class, the pranamaya kosha will be discussed as per the verses, succeeding verses authored by Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.